Every afternoon, just as the light softened into gold, Martha would find him there. Bentley, her senior golden retriever, would slowly make his way to the living room window, lower himself onto the cool hardwood floor with a quiet sigh, and stare toward the distant railway tracks beyond the maple trees. His muzzle had turned silver over the years, his joints stiff, his movements careful. But at exactly 4:17 p.m. he was always there. First Martha thought it was habit. Dogs love routines after all. But lately something had changed. The moment the faint rumble began in the distance, Bentley didn't just watch. He stood, trembling slightly. His ears perked higher than they had in months. His tail thumped once, twice, uncertain but hopeful. And when the train whistle pierced the afternoon air, he let out a soft whine that made Martha's chest tighten. "Bentley," she whispered, kneeling beside him. He pressed closer to the glass, breath fogging the pain. Not anxious. Not afraid. Waiting. The whistle echoed longer this time, rolling across the trees like a memory carried on steel rails. Bentley's body tensed as if preparing to greet someone who never appeared. Martha felt a strange ache bloom inside her. This wasn't random. This wasn't routine. This was longing. And as the train disappeared beyond the bend, Bentley didn't move from the window. But what the dog sensed was far from ordinary. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? Every afternoon, the house settled into the same soft silence. The dishes were washed. The mail sorted. The sunlight angled low across the living room floor, stretching long rectangles of gold across the hardwood. And at exactly 4:17 p.m., Bentley would rise. Not quickly. Not the way he used to. He would push himself up with a careful exhale, his back legs stiff, his joints carrying the weight of 13 winters. His nails clicked lightly against the floor as he crossed the room. Step. Pause. Step again. Martha always watched him from the kitchen doorway. It had started months ago. Maybe longer. Time had a way of blurring since Thomas passed. Bentley would make his way to the front window, the wide one that faced the line of maple trees and beyond them the distant railway. He would circle once, lower himself slowly onto the cool patch of shade near the glass, and wait. First Martha smiled at it. "Guard duty," she would tease softly. Bentley would flick one ear back at the sound of her voice but never fully turn. His amber eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, cloudy now with age yet still steady. The house felt different in those minutes. Still, anticipating something, Martha told herself it was routine. Dogs love routine. The afternoon train had passed through town for decades. It was background noise, a low rumble that most people hardly noticed anymore. But Bentley noticed. 4:16. His head would lift. 4:17. The faint vibration would begin. A tremor beneath the quiet. The floorboards barely quivered, but Bentley felt it before Martha ever could. His ears would rise, alert in a way that seemed almost youthful. His spine straightened. He stood. That was new. He hadn't stood for the train before. Now, as the distant engine rolled closer, he would rise slowly to all fours, leaning slightly forward, nose inches from the glass. His breath would fog the window in small cloudy circles. The whistle pierced the afternoon. Long low, echoing across the neighborhood like a voice carried on wind. Bentley trembled. Not fear. Something else. His tail moved once. Then again. A hesitant thump against the wall. Martha felt it in her chest. She dried her hands on a dish towel and stepped into the living room. "Bentley?" she asked gently. He didn't look at her. His body leaned toward the sound, muscles tight but not distressed. His breathing changed, shallow, quick, almost hopeful. Hopeful. That was the word that unsettled her. The train roared past behind the trees, unseen but unmistakable. The whistle sounded again, shorter this time. Bentley gave a soft whine. Not loud. Not sharp. Just a thin thread of sound that slipped into the quiet house. Martha knelt beside him. Her knees protested the hardwood, but she ignored it. She placed her hand lightly on his back. His fur was warm, thinner than it used to be. "You hear that old thing every day," she whispered. "Nothing special." But her voice didn't sound convinced. Bentley shifted his weight forward, paws pressed near the baseboard. His nose traced the glass as if trying to catch a scent through it. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't confused. He was waiting. The train clattered along the tracks, the rhythm fading slowly as it curved beyond town. The whistle dissolved into distance. Still Bentley stood there. Still he watched. Seconds stretched. A full minute passed. Finally his posture softened. The tension drained from his shoulders. His tail stilled. He lowered himself carefully back to the floor. But he didn't leave. Martha stayed beside him longer than usual. The late October air outside carried the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk. Somewhere down the street, a screen door closed. Life moved on. Bentley rested his chin on the window ledge, eyes open, watching the empty tracks. That evening, while she folded laundry in the bedroom, Martha found herself listening for something she had never paid attention to before. The exact pitch of the whistle, the direction of the wind when it sounded, the way Bentley reacted. Later, as she settled into her recliner, she glanced at him. He was asleep now, curled into the rug near her feet. His breathing was steady, paws twitching faintly with dreams. He looked peaceful. But something about the afternoon lingered in her thoughts. The next day she paid closer attention. 4:15. Bentley lifted his head from his nap. 4:16. He stood. 4:17. He was already at the window. This time Martha followed him immediately. The rumble began. Bentley's ears rose higher than she'd seen in months. The stiffness seemed to melt from him as adrenaline, gentle and invisible, moved through his aging body. The whistle came. He leaned forward so suddenly his collar tag tapped against the glass. Ping! A small metallic sound that felt too loud in the quiet room. "Hey!" Martha murmured, steadying him with one hand. "Easy." But he didn't pull away. He scanned the tree line, eyes sharp. And then, a soft wag. Faster than yesterday. 3 steady thumps against the wall. Martha's throat tightened. It wasn't random. It wasn't casual curiosity. It was recognition. When the train passed completely, Bentley remained upright far longer than before. His breathing stayed elevated. His gaze fixed on the bend in the tracks where the engine disappeared. "Bentley." She swallowed. A thought flickered, unwelcome, fragile. She pushed it away. No, couldn't be that. It had been 2 years. 2 full years since Thomas's funeral. 2 years since hospital corridors and quiet condolences and folded flags. 2 years since the front door had opened at 4:25 p.m. sharp, and Thomas would step inside smelling faintly of diesel and autumn wind. Bentley used to race to that door. Back then his bark had been loud, joyful, certain. Now he stood by the window, waiting. The whistle faded into nothing. Bentley slowly lowered himself to the floor, but instead of lying down, he remained seated, alert, listening for something that never came. Martha sat beside him, her hand resting lightly against his side. She felt the rise and fall of his breathing. "You miss him too," she whispered, barely audible. Bentley's ear flicked at the sound of her voice. Outside, the maple leaves drifted across the lawn. Inside, the house felt fuller and emptier all at once. Bentley finally exhaled and rested his head against the wall beneath the window. But he did not leave. And as the golden light dimmed into evening, Martha understood something she had tried not to name. This wasn't habit. This wasn't coincidence. Every day at 4:17 p.m., her old dog wasn't listening to a train. He was listening for someone. And that realization settled quietly into her heart. Heavy, tender, unavoidable. The next afternoon, Martha set an alarm. 4:12 p.m. She told herself it was silly. Still, when the soft chime sounded from her phone, her heart skipped. Bentley was asleep near the couch, his chin resting on his paws, the slow rhythm of his breathing filling the room. Sunlight pooled around him, warming the faded rug beneath his body. For a moment she considered ignoring it. Let it pass. Let it be coincidence. But at 4:15 Bentley's ears twitched. He didn't lift his head yet. Just one ear then the other. Listening. Martha leaned forward in her chair. The house was quiet. No cars passing. No doors closing down the street. Just the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Bentley's eyes opened. Slowly. He didn't seem confused or startled. There was no frantic movement. No barking. Only awareness. He pushed himself up with effort, back legs stiff, front paws stretching forward in a long, careful arc. His nails tapped softly against the floor as he began walking toward the window. Step. Pause. Step again. Martha followed him this time, staying a few feet behind. She watched everything. The way his posture straightened as he approached the glass. The slight lift of his tail, not high, not wagging yet. Just poised. At 4:16 the faintest vibration moved through the floorboards. It was so subtle she might have imagined it. But Bentley didn't imagine it. His ears snapped forward. His body stilled. The air felt charged, thin, expectant. Then came the rumble. Low at first. Distant. A sound carried through earth before air. Bentley leaned closer to the window. His nose brushed the glass. A small foggy oval appeared and faded. When the whistle blew sharp and clear, something changed in him. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. But it was unmistakable. His tail began to move. Not slow. Not stiff. It moved the way it used to. Martha's breath caught. She hadn't seen that rhythm in a long time. That steady, confident wag that once greeted the sound of a truck pulling into the driveway. The whistle echoed again. Bentley gave a soft whine. Higher this time. Not distressed. Yearning. His weight shifted from paw to paw. He stood taller, stretching his neck as if trying to see beyond the trees. Martha stepped beside him. Bentley, she whispered, her voice barely steady. He didn't turn. His eyes were fixed on the bend in the tracks, the place where the train would emerge for just a moment between branches before disappearing again. The engine roared past unseen. Bentley's body trembled. Not from weakness, from anticipation. And then, just for a second, his ears flattened slightly, like they used to when he prepared to sprint toward the door. But he didn't run. He couldn't. Instead, he remained at the glass, breathing faster now, chest rising and falling. The whistle faded. The rumble softened. Silence returned. And that's when it happened. Bentley let out a sound Martha hadn't heard in years. A small, hopeful bark. Just one. Sharp. Bright. It echoed strangely in the quiet living room. Martha felt tears sting her eyes. Oh, sweetheart. She crouched beside him, her hand resting gently against his ribs. She could feel his heart beating faster than usual. He didn't look at her. He kept staring at the horizon, waiting for a shape that never appeared. After a long minute, his tail slowed. The tremble eased. But his gaze didn't soften. He stood there longer than ever before. 5 minutes. 10. Martha stayed beside him the entire time. Eventually, Bentley lowered himself to the floor, but he didn't lie down fully. He remained upright, chest lifted, ears still angled forward. Alert. Listening for something beyond sound. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. The house creaked gently as temperatures dropped outside. Wind brushed against the siding. A car passed once, headlights sweeping briefly across the bedroom ceiling. She turned onto her side and stared at the faint glow of the digital clock. 4:17. The numbers replayed in her mind. 4 years. Thomas had stepped off the afternoon commuter train at 4:19. The station was only a few blocks away. By 4:25 he would be at the door. Bentley used to know the difference between that train and any other. Martha remembered it clearly now. Even when schedules shifted, even when Thomas was delayed, Bentley would wait, but only on certain days. Only when Thomas was due home. She had laughed about it back then. Better memory than me, she'd say. Thomas would grin, scratching behind Bentley's ears. He knows his people. Martha squeezed her eyes shut. It had been 2 years. 2 years since hospital monitors in quiet hallways. Since the folded train schedule still pinned to the fridge. Bentley had seemed confused at first. He searched the house, checked the bedroom, sat near the door for days. But eventually he stopped. Or so she thought. The next afternoon came with thin gray clouds and a hint of rain in the air. At 4:14, Bentley was already awake. He stood before the alarm even chimed. Martha felt her pulse quicken. He moved toward the window faster this time. Not running but determined. His gait steadier than usual. When the rumble began, he didn't hesitate. He was ready. Ears forward. Tail lifting. Body angled toward the sound. The whistle split the damp air outside. Bentley let out a low, throaty whine that seemed to rise from somewhere deep inside him. Martha felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't random. It wasn't habit. It wasn't even memory in the simple sense. It was expectation. She stepped closer, pressing her palm gently against the glass beside his head. It was cool to the touch. "Bentley," she said softly, her voice trembling despite herself. "He's not coming home on that train." The words felt fragile. Bentley's tail wagged once more, hopeful, certain. He scanned the street beyond the trees. He listened. And for a brief, aching second, Martha almost believed she heard it too. Footsteps on gravel. A familiar key in the lock. A voice calling from the doorway. But there was nothing. Only the fading echo of steel on rails. Bentley's wag slowed. His ears lowered slightly. He remained standing long after the train disappeared. Waiting. And as Martha watched the light drain from the afternoon sky, she realized something that made her knees feel weak. Bentley didn't just hear the whistle. He remembered what it meant. And in his aging heart, it still meant someone was coming home. The house felt smaller the next morning. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the walls were holding something unspoken. Martha stood at the kitchen sink, watching a thin line of rain trace its way down the window. The sky was pale and heavy, the kind of gray that made the afternoon come early. Behind her, Bentley lay on his bed near the hallway. He wasn't asleep. She could tell by the way his ears shifted at every distant sound. Listening. Always listening. She dried her hands slowly and glanced at the refrigerator. The train schedule was still there. Faded. Yellowed at the corners. Held in place by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse Thomas had brought back from Maine years ago. She hadn't taken it down. She told herself it didn't matter. But now it did. At 3:58 p.m. Bentley stood. Too early. Martha noticed immediately. He didn't go to the window yet. Instead, he walked to the front door. He stood there quietly, facing it. Not scratching. Not barking. Just positioned. Her breath caught. He used to stand there like that. Every weekday. 4:25 sharp. Thomas's key would slide into the lock. The door would open with a soft groan. Diesel and cool air would drift in with him. And Bentley would explode into motion. Back then, his bark had been loud and bright. His tail would spin like a metronome set too fast. He would circle Thomas, pressing against his legs, nose lifting toward his coat pocket where a biscuit always waited. Martha used to watch from the kitchen, smiling at the predictability of it. "You've got competition," she would tease. Thomas would laugh. "He only loves me for the snacks." Bentley would glance at Martha then, just once, before returning his full devotion to the man at the door. It had been their ritual. Unshakable. Until it wasn't. The day Thomas didn't come home, Bentley had waited longer than anyone else. Even after Martha returned alone from the hospital, hollow and unsteady, Bentley had stood at the door, tail wagging slowly, confused. He had sniffed her coat, searching for something. For someone. He had checked every room that night. The bedroom, the bathroom, the garage, and then he had returned to the door. Saturday. Waited. Martha had knelt beside him, burying her face into his thick golden fur. "He's not coming back," she had whispered. Bentley had licked the salt from her cheeks. But the next day he waited again. And the next. Until gradually the waiting stopped. Or so she believed. Now, standing in the quiet hallway, Martha watched him at the door. His posture was steady, hopeful. She stepped closer. "Bentley," she said gently. "It's not time." His ears flicked at her voice, but he didn't move. At 4:12 he turned from the door. Not confused. Certain. He walked toward the living room window instead. Martha followed him, her heart pounding softly in her chest. The rain had slowed to a mist. The maple branches swayed lightly in the breeze. Bentley reached the window and stood tall, waiting. At 4:16, before the rumble even began, his tail lifted. Just slightly. Martha felt tears gather in her eyes. He remembered the schedule. Not just the sound. The timing. The meaning. The whistle cut through the damp air, clearer somehow in the cool weather. Bentley's entire body reacted. His ears shot forward. His weight shifted onto his front paws. His tail wagged steady strong. Martha's breath hitched. "He's not on that train," she whispered, but her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Bentley let out a soft bark. Higher this time. Eager. He leaned so close to the glass that his collar tag clicked softly against it. Ping. That tiny sound shattered something inside her. Because she remembered another sound. Thomas's boots on the porch steps. Heavy. Predictable. Comforting. The whistle blew again. Bentley trembled. His body seemed younger in those moments, energized by belief. Martha closed her eyes briefly. She hadn't allowed herself to think about those afternoons in detail. The way Thomas would loosen his tie as he stepped inside. The way he would kneel to Bentley's level, pressing his forehead lightly against the dog's. "Miss me, partner?" Bentley always responded the same way. 3 excited barks. A spin. Then a nose nudge toward the tree pocket. The train thundered past unseen beyond the trees. Bentley's breathing quickened. His tail moved faster. He took one small step back from the window, then another, turning slightly toward the hallway, toward the front door. As if calculating, as if preparing. Martha felt her knees weaken. "Oh, sweetheart." Bentley took 2 careful steps toward the door. He paused, looked back at the window, then toward the hallway again. He was choosing. The whistle faded into the distance. The rumble softened. Silence returned. Bentley stood still in the center of the living room, waiting for the next sound, the next signal, the next piece of the ritual. But nothing came. No key in the lock. No boots on the steps. No familiar voice filling the doorway. Only the faint drip of rain from the gutters. Bentley's tail slowed. His ears lowered gradually. The hopeful tension drained from his body. But he didn't lie down. He walked to the door. Saturday. And faced it. Martha covered her mouth with her hand. She hadn't seen him do this in nearly 2 years. He was remembering. Not in fragments. Not by accident. Fully. Completely. The whistle meant arrival. Arrival meant Thomas. And Thomas always came home. Martha stepped forward and lowered herself slowly beside him on the floor. The wood was cool beneath her palms. She placed her hand on Bentley's back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Bentley leaned slightly into her touch. But his eyes remained on the door. Soft. Certain. Patient. And in that quiet hallway, with the scent of rain lingering in the air and the ghost of a whistle still echoing in her memory, Martha finally understood something she had avoided for far too long. Bentley had not forgotten. He had simply been waiting for the right sound to believe again. The wind shifted overnight. By morning the air felt sharper, cleaner somehow, as if autumn had decided to settle in for good. Martha noticed Bentley was quieter than usual. Not withdrawn, just focused. He followed her from room to room with a steadiness she hadn't seen in a while. When she folded laundry, he lay nearby but kept lifting his head at small sounds. When she stepped out to collect the mail, he stood at the door before she even reached for the handle, watching, measuring time. At 4:05 p.m. he was already awake. By 4:10 he stood near the living room. At 4:12, he walked to the window without hesitation. Martha felt the tension before the rumble ever came. She stood in the doorway, arms folded loosely, pretending she wasn't counting the seconds. Bentley positioned himself closer to the glass than usual, so close that his shoulder brushed the wall. His body leaned forward, weight distributed carefully over stiff joints but determined. 416. The faint vibration stirred through the floorboards. Bentley froze. Not startled. Anticipating. The rumble grew louder. The whistle followed, long and low, echoing through the cool air. Bentley reacted instantly. His tail lifted higher than it had in weeks. It wagged strong, steady, hopeful. He gave a short bark. Then another. Bright. Alive. Martha's throat tightened. "Bentley," she said gently. "Easy." But he didn't slow. As the train roared past beyond the trees, Bentley shifted backward from the window. Not retreating. Preparing. He turned toward the hallway. Toward the door. And this time he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to it. His pace wasn't fast, but it was purposeful. Each step placed carefully, nails tapping against the hardwood in a rhythm that sounded almost urgent. He reached the door and stood tall, tail wagging, ears forward, waiting for the sound that always came next. Martha's heart pounded softly in her chest. The whistle faded. The rumble softened. But Bentley remained standing. He leaned forward slightly, nose angled toward the crack beneath the door. Sniffing. Searching. A minute passed. Then two. His tail slowed, but it didn't stop. He shifted his weight. Pressed closer. And then he barked. Louder this time. The sound startled Martha. It wasn't aggressive. It was calling. "Bentley," she whispered, stepping toward him. "There's no one there." He barked again, then pawed lightly at the door. Not scratching. Not frantic. Just a gentle tap. Tap. As if reminding it to open. Martha reached for the handle anyway. Her hand trembled slightly. She opened the door. Cool air drifted inside. The porch was empty. Leaves skittered across the steps. The street beyond lay quiet beneath a pale sky. Bentley leaned forward, nose working quickly, pulling in the scent of wind and wood smoke and damp earth. He took one slow step onto the porch, then stopped. His tail wagged once more, hopeful. He scanned the sidewalk, the driveway, the bend in the street. Nothing. The wind rustled the maple branches overhead. Martha knelt beside him. "He's not coming," she said softly, her voice breaking despite her effort to keep it steady. Bentley didn't look at her. He remained fixed on the street, waiting. After a long moment, his tail slowed. The hopeful tension eased from his posture. But he didn't step back inside. He stood there, refusing to move. "Come on," Martha murmured gently, touching his collar. "It's cold." Bentley resisted. Not by pulling. Not by stiffening. He simply planted his paws more firmly, as if the porch itself was a boundary he had decided not to cross back over. The whistle echoed faintly in the distance one last time. Bentley's ears twitched sharply. His body leaned forward again. Hope reignited. He gave a soft, aching whine. And Martha felt something inside her fracture. She tried again. "Bentley, please." He didn't budge. Cars passed at the end of the street. A neighbor's dog barked once. The world moved on. But Bentley remained on that porch, eyes fixed on the empty road, as though time itself had paused for him. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The chill began to seep through Martha's sweater. She wrapped her arms around herself but stayed beside him, because she understood now. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't stubbornness. It was loyalty stretched thin across years. Bentley lowered himself slowly onto the wooden boards. But he did not turn away from the street. He lay facing it. Head lifted. Ears angled forward. Waiting. The sky deepened toward evening. Golden light brushed across the pavement, then faded. Finally, Martha reached forward and stroked the side of his face. "He loved you," she whispered. "You know that, don't you?" Bentley blinked slowly. His breathing steadied, but he still didn't move. She leaned closer, resting her forehead lightly against his. Just like Thomas used to. The memory hit her like a quiet wave. Bentley's tail moved once. Soft. Gentle. And in that small motion she saw it clearly. He wasn't just waiting for Thomas. He was holding the place open. Keeping the ritual alive. As if love could still arrive on schedule. The evening air grew colder. Martha finally slipped her hands beneath his chest and belly, lifting gently. "Let's go inside," she murmured. This time he allowed it. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back into the house. But even as she closed the door, Bentley turned his head toward the street one last time. Listening, as if certain. Tomorrow the whistle would mean something again. The next morning arrived bright and deceptively ordinary. Sunlight streamed through the living room window, warming the hardwood in soft amber stripes. Dust floated lazily in the beams, drifting in slow spirals. Bentley lay near the couch, chin resting on his paws, watching the window. Not asleep, just aware. Martha stood in the center of the room with her hands on her hips. She hadn't planned to rearrange anything, but something about the space felt unfinished, unresolved. The armchair near the window had always been Thomas's. It still sat angled toward the street, slightly worn at the arms where his hands had rested every evening. Martha hadn't moved it in 2 years. Now she stared at it. Bentley followed her gaze. His ears twitched. "You think it's time?" she murmured quietly. The question wasn't really about furniture. It was about air. Memory. Wait. At 11 a.m. she began. Slowly, she slid the coffee table a few inches back. Adjusted the rug. Finally she approached the armchair. Bentley stood immediately. His joints protested, but he ignored it. He walked toward her as she gripped the back of the chair. When she pulled it forward, it scraped lightly across the floor. A low dragging sound. Bentley's head snapped toward the space behind it. His nose lifted. Air shifted. Dust stirred. And then, he moved. Not rushed. Not frantic. But purposeful. He stepped past Martha's legs and lowered his head toward the narrow gap where the chair had been. His tail began to wag. Slow at first. Then stronger. Martha frowned slightly. "What is it?" Bentley nudged something with his nose. A soft thud against the baseboard. He pawed gently once. Then again. Martha knelt beside him. The scent hit her first. Faint. Fabric. Old leather. Something that hadn't seen light in a long time. She reached behind the chair and pulled it free. Dust coated her fingers. And in her hands was Thomas's conductor's cap. Dark navy. Slightly faded at the brim. The silver railroad emblem still polished from years of habit. Martha's breath left her in a quiet rush. She hadn't realized it was missing. She must have tucked it there the week after the funeral. Or maybe Thomas had set it down absent-mindedly one evening and never picked it up again. She couldn't remember. But Bentley remembered. The moment the cap cleared the shadow, his tail thumped hard against the wall. Thump, thump, thump. His entire body vibrated, not with confusion, with recognition. He stepped closer, nose working quickly, inhaling deeply. His ears lifted. His eyes softened. And then, he gave a small eager whine. Martha's vision blurred. "Oh, Bentley." She held the cap carefully, brushing dust from the brim with trembling fingers. Bentley nudged it again. More urgently this time. Not biting. Not grabbing. Just pressing his nose against it with delicate insistence. As if saying, This is what it means." Martha lowered the cap toward him. He inhaled deeply. And something shifted in his posture. His back straightened slightly. His tail wagged in that steady rhythm she hadn't seen since before Thomas fell ill. The room felt different suddenly. Charged. Alive with memory. Bentley took a step toward the window. Then stopped. Looked at her. Then at the cap. Then toward the front door. Martha felt her heartbeat in her ears. "You think he's coming," she whispered. Bentley let out a soft bark. Just one. Bright. Hopeful. The afternoon crept closer. At 4:10, Bentley was already positioned near the window, but this time he wasn't alone. The conductor's cap rested in Martha's hands. She sat in Thomas's armchair, now slightly repositioned, holding the weight of it in her lap. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic beneath it. Memory. Bentley stood tall as the rumble began. His ears lifted higher than they had in months. The whistle cut through the afternoon air. And this time, his reaction was immediate. He barked twice. Clear. Certain. He turned toward Martha, eyes bright. Then back to the window. His body trembled, but not from weakness. From belief. Martha's breath caught. She stood slowly, cap still in her hands. Bentley moved toward the door before the train even passed fully. He knew the sequence. He always had. She followed him. Her steps unsteady. He reached the door and stood tall. Tail wagging. Eyes fixed ahead. Waiting. Martha opened the door again. The porch was empty. The street quiet. Leaves drifted along the curb. Bentley stepped forward. Inhaled deeply. His tail wagged faster when the wind shifted. For one fragile second, Martha felt it too. That old rhythm. That old expectation. The whistle echoed faintly as the train curved out of town. Bentley leaned forward, listening. But nothing followed. No footsteps. No key in the lock. No voice calling from the driveway. His tail slowed. Gradually. Gently. But he did not lie down this time. He turned. Walked back inside. And instead of returning to the window, he approached Martha. He pressed his nose against the conductor's cap, then rested his chin lightly on her knee. His eyes lifted to hers. Soft. Searching. Martha knelt down fully in front of him. She placed the cap on the floor between them. Bentley lowered his head and rested it gently against the brim. He closed his eyes, and in that quiet moment she understood. The whistle wasn't just a sound. It was tied to this. To fabric and scent and ritual. To the weight of a cap placed on a hallway hook every evening. Bentley wasn't waiting blindly. He was following a pattern. One that had never broken in his mind. Martha reached forward and smoothed her hand over his silvered fur. "We can't keep waiting like this," she whispered. Bentley opened his eyes slowly. His tail gave one soft thump. Not as hopeful as before. Not as certain. But steady. And for the first time Martha wondered. Maybe the waiting didn't have to end. Maybe it just needed to change. That night, Martha placed the conductor's cap on the hallway table. Not hidden. Not tucked away. Visible. Bentley noticed immediately. He walked past it once, paused, then circled back. His nose hovered just above the brim. He inhaled slowly. Carefully. As if committing the scent to memory all over again. Martha watched from the kitchen doorway. She felt something steady forming inside her. Not the sharp ache of grief, but a quieter understanding. For 2 years, she had tried to protect herself by folding memories away. Putting them in drawers. Behind chairs. Inside silence. But Bentley had not. He had kept the pattern intact. Train whistle. Door. Arrival. Love. Simple. Unbroken. The next afternoon arrived cool and bright. A thin blue sky stretched overhead, crisp and open. Sunlight reflected off the window glass in pale flashes. At 4:05 Bentley stood. At 4:10 he walked to the hallway table first. He sniffed the cap. Then looked toward the living room. Then back at Martha. It wasn't frantic. It was inviting. She swallowed. "You want me to bring it?" His tail gave one steady wag. She picked up the cap. The fabric felt lighter now somehow. Less like a relic. More like something alive. Bentley walked beside her to the window. Not ahead. Beside. They stood together as the minutes ticked forward. 4:16. The faint rumble stirred through the floorboards. Bentley's ears lifted. But this time he did not tremble. He stayed close to her leg. The whistle cut through the air. Long. Clear. Familiar. Bentley inhaled sharply. His tail wagged but softer. Less urgent. He glanced up at Martha. then back toward the trees. Martha crouched beside him, placing the conductor's cap gently on the window ledge. Bentley leaned forward and touched it with his nose. Then he did something new. He sat. Not standing tall. Not preparing to run to the door. He sat. Eyes forward. Listening. The train roared past beyond the maples. The whistle echoed again. Bentley's ears twitched, but he did not move toward the hallway. He stayed. Beside her. Martha felt tears fill her eyes, but they did not fall. "He loved coming home," she whispered softly. "And we loved waiting." Bentley's tail thumped once against the wall. Slow. Gentle. The rumble faded. Silence returned. Bentley looked at the cap. Then at Martha. His eyes were softer than they had been in days. Less searching. More knowing. And that's when it settled fully into her heart. The whistle wasn't telling him someone was arriving. It was reminding him someone had. Every day at 4:17. The sound had once meant joy. Connection. Reunion. Bentley wasn't stuck in the past. He was honoring it. Martha reached for the cap and held it against her chest. Her breathing slowed. For months she had avoided this hour. Found errands. Turned on the television. Closed the blinds. But Bentley had faced it directly. Every single day. Loyal. Patient. Faithful to a rhythm that had shaped his world. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead gently to his. Just like Thomas used to. Bentley exhaled. A deep, steady breath. His body relaxed fully against her knees. No trembling. No urgency. Just presence. The next day she was ready earlier. At 4:12 she was already seated by the window. The cap rested on her lap. Bentley joined her without prompting. He leaned lightly into her side. The rumble came. The whistle followed. And this time when the sound filled the room, Martha spoke. "He's home," she said softly. "Not to the street. Not to the tracks. But to Bentley." His ears flicked toward her voice. His tail gave a slow, thoughtful wag. She rested one hand on the cap and one on his back. "We carry him here," she added quietly. Bentley did not move toward the door. He stayed seated, breathing steady, listening. The whistle faded. The house remained quiet. But it no longer felt empty. For the first time since Thomas's passing, the 4:17 hour didn't feel like an open wound. It felt like a bridge. A moment to remember without unraveling. Bentley lowered himself gently onto the floor beside her chair. He rested his chin near her slipper. Eyes half closed. Calm. Martha watched the maple leaves sway beyond the glass. The train would pass again tomorrow. And the next day. And the next. But something had shifted. The waiting was no longer for footsteps on the porch. It was for the sound itself. For the shared memory carried in it. Bentley gave one soft sigh. Content. And as Martha smoothed her hand along his silvered back, she realized. He had been guiding her all along. Teaching her how to sit with the whistle. Without expecting the door to open. The next week unfolded with a different kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence that pressed against the walls. Not the waiting that tightened Martha's chest. This quiet felt intentional. Chosen. At 4:10 each afternoon, Martha would turn off the television if it was on. She would silence her phone. She would carry the conductor's cap from the hallway table and settle into the armchair by the window. Bentley no longer rushed ahead of her. He walked beside her. Slow. Steady. His shoulder brushing lightly against her leg as if making sure she kept pace. The maple leaves had thinned now. Bare branches stretched against the pale November sky. The air outside carried the faint scent of chimney smoke and distant rain. At 4:16, Bentley would lift his head. The rumble would stir beneath the floor. And instead of rising abruptly, instead of trembling, he would look at her. Waiting for the shared signal. Martha would place one hand on his back. "I hear it," she would whisper. The whistle would follow. Long, familiar. Clear. And they would sit. Together. Bentley's tail still moved at the sound. But it was softer now. Not the urgent wag of expectation. more like a gentle acknowledgement. Yes, I know that sound. Some days he would rest his chin on the windowsill. Other days he would lean against her knee. Once he surprised her. As the whistle echoed through the trees, he picked up the brim of the conductor's cap gently in his mouth and carried it, carefully, reverently, to the front door. He did not bark. He did not paw. He simply laid the cap down at the threshold and sat beside it. Martha felt her breath catch. She stood slowly and joined him. The house was still. Sunlight stretched across the entryway floor. Bentley looked up at her. Not searching. Not confused. Just offering. She knelt and picked up the cap. "Thank you," she whispered. She didn't know exactly what she was thanking him for. For remembering. For loving. For refusing to let grief erase ritual. She placed the cap back on the table and returned to the window with him. That afternoon, for the first time, she spoke aloud during the whistle. "Hi, Tom," she said softly, eyes on the trees. "We're here." Bentley's ears flicked at the name. His tail thumped once. The whistle faded. And neither of them moved toward the door. Over the following days, something gentle began to grow in that 4:17 hour. Instead of tightening, Martha's chest would loosen. Instead of bracing herself, she would breathe. Sometimes she shared small updates. The roses finally bloomed again. "Your brother called from Arizona. The gutters need fixing." Bentley would listen, head tilted slightly, ears relaxed. As if the conversation itself mattered more than any reply. One afternoon, rain streaked down the glass in silver lines. The train's rumble sounded deeper in the damp air. Bentley startled slightly at the first vibration, an old reflex, but quickly settled when Martha placed her palm against his side. "I've got you," she murmured. He leaned into her. The whistle cut through the rain. And instead of standing tall in expectation, Bentley lowered himself onto the rug. He rested fully on his side. Relaxed. Martha blinked back sudden tears. This was new. He wasn't waiting to greet anyone. He was staying. Choosing presence over anticipation. Choosing her. The days shortened as winter edged closer. The light at 4:17 turned bluer, thinner. Sometimes the train's silhouette became visible through the bare branches. A flash of steel moving steadily along the horizon. Bentley would watch it pass. Calm. Alert but peaceful. Once, as the whistle echoed and the train emerged briefly between trees, Martha reached for his paw. His fur felt softer than she remembered. Thinner. Age was moving quietly through him. She felt it in the way he took longer to stand. In the careful way he lowered himself to the floor. In the slight cloudiness of his eyes. The thought arrived gently but firmly. There would not be endless 4:17s. Time was still moving, even if memory stood still. That evening, after the whistle faded and the sky darkened early, Martha lit a small candle on the windowsill. Bentley watched the flame flicker. It reflected in the glass like a second light beyond the trees. "Just for him," she whispered. Bentley rested his head against her thigh. His breathing slow. Steady. Safe. The ritual was no longer about waiting for footsteps. It had become something else. Honoring. A remembering. A daily acknowledgement that love had lived here, and still did. One afternoon, as the whistle sang across the cold air, Martha realized she was smiling. Not the tight, polite smile she gave neighbors. A real one. Soft at the edges. Bentley looked up at her. His tail gave one contented thump. She brushed her fingers through the fur along his neck. "You did this," she whispered. "You kept him close." Bentley blinked slowly. Outside, the train curved beyond the bend and disappeared. Inside, the house felt warm. Full. Not because someone new had arrived, but because something old had finally settled. The ritual had changed. And in changing, it had healed them both. Winter arrived quietly. Not with a storm. Not with drama. Just a thin layer of frost on the lawn one morning, and breath visible in the early air. The maple trees stood bare now, their branches etched against a pale sky like careful pencil lines. Bentley moved more slowly these days. He still followed Martha from room to room, but his steps were shorter. more deliberate. Sometimes he paused halfway down the hallway, gathering strength before continuing. She noticed everything. The way he slept more deeply. The way his back legs trembled after standing too long. The way he leaned into her more often, not from need but from quiet closeness. Still at 4:10 each afternoon he woke. No alarm needed. His ears would lift first, then his head. Then carefully he would rise. Martha had begun keeping the conductor's cap on the windowsill now. It belonged there. Part of the light. Part of the ritual. That afternoon the sky was clear and sharp blue. The air held that particular stillness that comes before evening settles in early. Bentley walked to the window and lowered himself onto the rug. Not standing this time. Not even sitting. He lay down, his chin resting gently on his paws. Martha felt something shift inside her. She sat beside him on the floor instead of in the chair, close enough that her shoulder touched his side. 4:16. The faint vibration stirred beneath them. Bentley's ears lifted slightly. The rumble grew. The whistle followed, long and clear, rolling across the quiet neighborhood. Bentley did not rise. He did not tremble. His tail gave one slow, thoughtful wag against the rug. Martha placed her hand on his back. "I hear it," she whispered. He turned his head slightly toward her voice. His eyes were softer than ever, clouded with age, but clear and understanding. The train emerged briefly between the bare branches, a flash of steel moving steadily along the horizon. Bentley watched it pass. Not searching, not expecting, just witnessing. The whistle sounded once more as it curved out of sight. The rumble faded into distance. Silence returned. Bentley exhaled. Long, deep. His body settled heavier against the floor. Martha felt it immediately. The weight. The stillness. She shifted slightly, cradling his head gently in her lap. His fur felt thinner now beneath her fingers. Warm. Familiar. "You were such a good boy," she murmured softly. His tail moved once more. Barely. But it moved. Outside, the sky began to soften toward gold. Light stretched across the floor in pale winter lines. Bentley's breathing slowed. Not sharply. Not suddenly. Just gradually. Like a tide easing back from shore. Martha stroked the fur along his neck the way Thomas used to. Slow circles. Gentle pressure. She didn't cry. Not yet. She simply stayed. Present. The whistle did not sound again. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Bentley's chest rose. Fell. Rose. Then rested. Martha felt the stillness settle fully. She lowered her forehead to his. Just as Thomas once had. "Go on," she whispered. "He's home." The words didn't break her. They steadied her. Outside, a faint breeze stirred the bare branches. Somewhere far in the distance, another train whistle echoed, softer farther away. Or maybe it was only memory. Martha stayed on the floor for a long time. The conductor's cap rested on the windowsill above them. Sunlight caught the silver emblem, making it glint faintly. Evening deepened. Shadows lengthened. Eventually, she rose slowly and wrapped a soft blanket around Bentley's body. Her movements were careful, reverent. The house did not feel empty. It felt held. In the days that followed, for 17 still came. The rumble still stirred faintly beneath the floor. The whistle still carried across the neighborhood. And every afternoon, Martha returned to the window. She sat in the armchair, the conductor's cap resting in her lap. The first time the whistle sounded without Bentley beside her, her chest tightened. But she did not look toward the door. She looked toward the trees, toward the bend in the tracks. She placed one hand over the cap, and with the other, she rested her palm against the empty rug beside her chair. "I hear it," she whispered. The whistle echoed. Warm. Familiar. Full. The train passed. The sound faded. And instead of longing, she felt gratitude. For loyalty that waited. For love that remembered. For a dog who refused to let a ritual disappear. The light shifted softly across the floor. Outside, the world continued moving steady and sure. Inside, Martha closed her eyes for a moment, and in the quiet that followed the whistle, she no longer imagined footsteps on the porch. She imagined reunion, somewhere beyond schedules and stations, beyond windows and doors, where a silver-haired dog ran strong again, toward a familiar voice calling his name. The whistle would come again tomorrow, and she would listen, not for arrival, but for the echo of a love that had never truly left.